2020 is a year we will remember every year of our lives, compelled to shield, to isolate, to dig deep and deeper again and again. We've worried about the now, but thought about the new. Because it is in a dark time the eye begins to see, it's in the shadow of Wales today we've seen the outlines of our tomorrow. We have felt, like all the world, that if Wales can winter this one out, then we can summer anywhere. Even on the coldest morning, we can feel the pulse of electricity in the air, a new Welsh wave of confidence that is palpable and prefigurative, a premonition of that moment of elation that any independent nation feels on that very first morning when we rise to greet ourselves, a new dawn and a new door in a house we've built for ourselves. We've been a nation for 1,500 years and more. It's a modest demand to ask that we finally be given our own key to our own future. That key is more than a symbol. It's the lever that lifts our people out of poverty. It's the tool of transformation that changes Wales for good, fast and fundamentally. It's the catalyst for our conversion from a nation forever playing catch-up at the wrong end of the league table, at the long end of a queue, to a nation playing leapfrog, to a Wales in which we are the world's testbed, pioneers in progress from the climate to UBI. Because that is the most powerful thing of all about our independence, that we will be building a new state from scratch. And that means all the old ways of thinking, the old structures and systems of power, the mold and the dust are stripped away. Which is why independence is the most radical idea in Welsh politics today. Starting anew means there is nothing we cannot change. To turn the seed of that practical dream into our radical new reality, we need to combine hope with determination. We must work, as the poet says, as if we live in the early years of a better nation, even while we live in the dying years of a bitter state. The futures of Welsh agriculture, manufacturing, and our ports are currently being bartered in Brussels with no Welsh seat and no Welsh voice at that table. Sovereign control over territorial waters is one of the sticking points, and how ironic that is to hear when we in Wales still lack control of the water within our own borders, let alone the ones beyond them. Devolution died this week. Not my words, but those of a Labour member of the Senedd in the debate on the legislative consent motion for the Internal Market Bill. Devolution is not a sustainable end state and can never be in a country where Westminster will always reign supreme. Now, it was a year ago today that we woke up to a general election result set to change the course of these islands' history forever. An election in which a Tory tsunami swept over Labour's red wall in the north, thrashing decades-old majorities of thousands and giving succour to the spin that the Prime Minister now had a mandate for his version and vision of Greater England. A few weeks previously, and acutely aware of how in the coming months history could accelerate, I announced the establishment of a commission, independent in its role and independence-focused in its remit, to examine our constitutional future. The Commission got to work in the immediate aftermath of the general election under the skilled chairing of Elfyn Llwyd and published its report in September. There's no doubt that this report is the most detailed and important contribution to Plaid Cymru's and indeed Wales's thinking on our constitutional future in my lifetime. Looking to the coming decade, it lifts the mists of uncertainty and offers a visionary landscape for the new Wales that is poised to emerge. It's a report published at a critical tipping point between the slide into history of an old Wales and the coming into being of a new nation, one determined to strike out on a radically different path. Next May's election will mark a pivot of change that will determine the history of Wales, and indeed the whole of Britain, in the 21st century. We are living through the emergence of a new Wales, but also a new Britain too. The United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, ushered into existence 99 years ago, is entering its final chapter. The question to us in Wales is this: are we content to be passive bystanders at a funeral, or celebrants at a new birth and a new beginning? The Independence Commission has sketched out a pathway to the latter. It casts a cold eye on our economic performance relative to Britain as a whole, but equally it points out that prior to full independence, the Irish economy was in a far worse position. Yet Ireland is now one of the richest parts of these islands and indeed Europe, a confident, self-assured and independent nation with a seat at the United Nations. Why wouldn't we want to follow that example? After all, there's nothing intrinsically inferior about the Welsh that we cannot emulate the success of the Irish, or for that matter, that of many other small independent nations from the Baltic states to Slovakia and Slovenia. Not one of them would consider for an instant parting with the independence they have won for themselves in recent decades. Turning to its key recommendations, the Commission has succeeded in capturing the spirit of Plaid Cymru's goal. We aim not to break up Britain, but to remake it as an island of equals, of free and independent nations. As the son of a Worcestershire lass, and with Geordie nephews and nieces, I care about what happens to England deeply. But the British state fails working people there too. Our liberation is the first step in bringing down the whole rotten edifice that is imprisoning them as much as it has imprisoned us in poverty, sickness and despair for too long. The Commission set out a thought-provoking vision for our relationships with our closest neighbours in these islands. As it says, whatever constitutional status we achieve, we will always share our island with our English and Scottish friends. It makes perfect sense, therefore, for us to seek the closest possible relationships, but on the basis of equality, not the subordination that has been the case for much of our history. For relationships further afield, it presents a cogent argument that in the near term, Wales should aspire to the status of Norway, for example, as a member of the European Free Trade Association, thus securing for Wales access to the single market with the option of rejoining the European Union, a medium-term choice to be determined by the Welsh people in a future referendum. The Commission also presents us with the foundations for drawing up a Welsh constitution. Its framework for a self-determination bill clearly outlines not only a path to independence, but the principles that should underpin that journey. I've no doubt that these values will find a strong endorsement among members of Plaid Cymru and indeed among the people of Wales as a whole. The Commission makes practical recommendations for establishing a statutory commission to ensure that this happens, including the creation of citizens' assemblies to elevate awareness, participation and involvement. These proposals will be in Plaid Cymru's programme for government that we will put before the people of Wales in the election next May. This is an exciting opportunity for the ultimate exercise in participatory democracy. The Constitution is the chance for us to envision the nation we want to be. In 1993, Plaid Cymru drew up its own draft constitution of an independent Wales. It was a young, bespectacled Adam Price that led the initiative as Director of Policy. I don't mind admitting I was a bit of a geek, reading constitutions at the weekend was my idea of fun. Our 1993 draft guaranteed equality on the basis of not just race, sex, language and religion, but also ability and sexual orientation, which if enacted at the time would have meant Wales would have been one of the countries with the most radically inclusive statements of equality anywhere in the world. But as progress cannot stand still, today we would want to add our clear and unequivocal commitment to trans rights too. Our 1993 vision included in the constitution of an independent Wales social and economic and language and environmental rights, the right to housing, to a minimum income, to free healthcare, to a job, to workers' voices on company boards and a clear pathway to worker ownership, to a pollution-free environment, the right for every child to leave school fully bilingual. Writing our future constitution today, we will have new ideas about the Wales we want to create, and through digital technology, we can ensure that every one of our 3.3 million citizens has a role to play in shaping it. Deciding the constitutional future of Wales cannot be for any one faction or political party, but for the people as a whole. Our Welsh constitution won't just have founding fathers, but mothers, sons and daughters too. This is, after all, the very essence of independence. A constitution of the people of Wales, by the people of Wales, for all the people of Wales. This is the spirit of the New Wales. We can feel it stirring around us. It's in the very atmosphere that our political antennae are picking up. It's in the surge of support for the independence movement. It's in the crumbling walls of the Westminster Parliament, its politics like its architecture in irreversible decay. It's in the discovery that there are influential governments in Edinburgh, Belfast and Cardiff more capable than the Westminster cabal. Above all, it's implicit in the present COVID crisis, the sense that something new and better must come out of this. In the spring, next May, I believe that feeling will be tangible. The people of Wales have been through so much in these past months. They will not want to waste the opportunity offered to them. There's a saying in Welsh, nid da lle gellir gwell. Good is good, but better carries it. Wales Labour government may have been more cautious, more careful than its Westminster counterpart, and won warranted praise for doing so. But that was some low bar. It's high time we raised it. The electors won't just want to carry on with the old Wales. They will be looking for a new direction, one that offers hope, vision, ambition. They'll be looking for a new Wales. It's our job in Plaid Cymru to provide that hope for real, radical change. What do I mean exactly by the new Wales that is such a contrast with the old? Well, let me provide two examples for you. In the Senedd in the past few weeks, we've been debating a spatial strategy for Wales, how we envisage the regions of our country should be organised to ensure balanced and equitable economic development. And we've been presented with two maps, one of them old, one of them new. The old map is Labour's map. It divides Wales into 4 regions, one for the north, one each for the Swansea and Cardiff city regions, and one for the middle. This division is a reaction to UK government priorities. They include the city deals and the long-projected shared prosperity fund through which they're planning to bypass the Senedd. These old regions write off 3/4 of Wales in terms of economic and cultural viability. They are blind to the need for improved north-south communications. They're part of an historic, all too familiar agenda that would drive a wedge within Wales and looks outside of Wales for our salvation. They see Powys, Cardiff, Swansea, Newport and the northeast of our country as adjuncts to metropolitan England. And they neglect those parts of Wales most in need of regeneration, the rural west and the southern valleys. We in Plaid Cymru have a completely different vision, a new map for a new Wales. Rather than treat Wales as an appendage of England, whether that's the northern powerhouse, the Midlands engine, or the western gateway, we want to build up a Welsh dynamo, focusing on Wales' unique needs and opportunities. We will distribute wealth, power, and investment equitably across the whole of Wales by targeting intervention to the areas in most need. We'll improve connectivity from north to south as well as east to west. We will unlock the development potential of the whole of our diverse nation in ways compatible with the pressing need to address the environmental challenge. In short, our map is a map of the independent Wales of the future, not of the Western Britain of our past. My second example is unfair access to housing, the heart of the modern crisis of inequality that has been thrown into sharp relief by the COVID pandemic. Working class people, especially the young, are being priced out of the housing market. They are increasingly dependent on private landlords. They are living in substandard accommodation, having to pay more and more of their income on housing costs. They're having to choose between paying rent or paying for food, and heating or getting into arrears, which renders them vulnerable to homelessness. This is the old Wales. Labour's policy is to underplay the extent of the housing need and to overplay the role of large private developers in providing affordable homes through Section 106 planning agreements with local authorities. This policy has failed, and only a transformative new policy for a new Wales has a chance of meeting the challenge. And that's why we will create a new National Land and Housing Agency that will plan and execute a new mass programme of public house building, the likes of which we have not seen for 50 years. Old Wales and its old policies will not cut it. The transition to a new Wales is now a matter of urgency. We can no longer afford the luxury of leisurely incremental change, constantly having to accommodate the crabbed conservatism and suspicious caution of Welsh Labour. This is the way of the old Wales. What our nation needs now is new leadership, not old management. And the ultimate encapsulation of that will be independence itself. When I launched my 7 Steps to Independence proposals as part of my leadership campaign in 2018, I suggested holding an independence referendum by 2030 following a decade-long process of nation building and debate about Wales' constitutional future, mindful of the fact that we must not just secure a referendum on independence, but win it too. The Independence Commission also adopted that kind of time scale as the basis for its recommendations. However, the momentum of change now means that this period must be foreshortened. There are 2 pressing reasons for this. First, devolution itself. That most basic democratic principle that decisions affecting Wales should be made in Wales is under attack from Boris Johnson's Conservatives, as even the Welsh Government acknowledges. Westminster has never seen itself as Wales' partner in constitutional terms, but now it is devolution's enemy openly seeking every opportunity to subvert and reverse our hard-won democracy. Secondly, change elsewhere in these islands continues to accelerate. The demand for another independence referendum in Scotland is becoming unstoppable, notwithstanding Boris Johnson's objections. By 2025, Scotland could well be an independent country. And Brexit has also given further impetus to the calls for a united Ireland. These pressures, becoming stronger by the day, mean that Wales is in real danger of being left behind as part of a rump United Kingdom in a New England and Wales formation, which would be the ultimate worst of all worlds. The Independence Commission's recommendation is for 2 referendums. The first one exploratory to gauge people's views in order to persuade the UK government to hold a binding referendum. I understand the rationale for this idea. 2-stage and multi-option referenda have been proposed recently in the case of Scotland, though there by unionists with a very different agenda to our own. How the national question is framed and when is ultimately a decision for our people. The last 2 polls on independence put it on its highest support in history. An argument once derided as a pipe dream has moved from the margins to the mainstream. We can see it. We can sense it. That is why I can pledge today that, subject to party approval, a Plaid Cymru government able to command a majority in the Senedd will offer a referendum on independence for Wales in its first term. From 1997 to 2011, a gap of 14 years took us from assembly to a parliament. By 2025, 14 years will have elapsed again, and it will be right to give the people of Wales the chance to choose an independent future. Cynnig referendum ar annibyniaeth yn hymor cyntaf Llywodraeth Plaid Cymru. Dyna fy addewid I chi heddiw. I gyflawni hynny, un o gamau cyntaf Llywodraeth Newydd Plaid Cymru, fydde I sefydlu'r Comisiwn Cenedlaethol, Statudol a Argymhellir yn adroddiad yn Comisiwn ni. Dyma'r corff fydde'n gyfrifol am ymgynghori'n eang gyda phobl a sefydliadau ledled Cymru. Bydde'n archwilio yn fanwl y llwybr I annibyniaeth ac yn archwilio'r opsiynau ar gyfer perthynas newydd rhwng Cymru a chenedloedd eraill Prydain yn ogystal â'r Undeb Ewropeaidd. Yng ngeiriau'r Comisiwn ei hunan, rydym yn gryf o'r farn y dylai dyfodol hir dymor Cymru annibynnol fod yn un fel aelod llawn o'r Undeb Ewropeaidd. Mae'r Comisiwn yn cydnabod fod Brexit beth bynnag a ddigwyddydd dros y dyddiau nesaf yn golygu nad yw hyn yn bosib ar hyn o bryd. Dyna pam i'r dyfodol agos fod y Comisiwn yn cynnig argymhellion llawn dychymyg ar sut y gall Cymru heddiw greu berthynas glos gyda gwledydd Ewrop, argymhellion y byddai Llywodraeth Plaid Cymru eiddgar i'w roi ar waith. Wedi'r cyfan, does dim yn gynhenid am Gymru sy'n golygu na allwn efelychu llwyddiant Iwerddon, neu wledydd annibynnol bychain eraill megis Lithuania, Slovacia a Slovenia wrth greu argraff ryngwladol. Nid un o'r rhain fydde'n ystyried am enid droi ei cefn ar yr annibyniaeth y maint wedi ei ennill yn y degawdau diwethaf. It is many small independent countries which I found myself casting an envious eye towards in recent weeks in search of ideas and inspiration on how Wales could better respond to the COVID pandemic. Slovakia, a nation of 3.6 million, tested most of its population for COVID in just one weekend, identifying 38,000 new cases in just those 2 days. Finland, 400 deaths in a nation of 5.5 million and just 47.5 cases per 100,000 of the population in recent weeks. We are those countries similar size, equally proud, every bit as able. We are not the ones holding us back. We are the ones propelling us forward, free from the large and small sea conservative forces who feed us crumbs when our land is one of plenty. The horse is bolted, and it's too late to close the stable door. Naysayers have turned to convertible doubters. Confident is replacing curious. On highways and byways, the traffic moves to the beat of Yes Cymru on the bridges above. Banners and marches fuel our fire, but the Welsh spring can only truly bloom at the ballot box in May. If you want independence, you have to vote for it. Unionists may cook up another fake federalist vow, but if we can make a real vow, together, a vow to work hard, to win hearts and minds, to take others on the journey from skeptic to supporter, and to secure the fairest democracy of all, one where decisions about Wales are made in Wales by the people of Wales. And while hollow words still ring around the hallowed halls of Westminster, we will keep our vow for Wales. It's fitting that I make this speech on this day of all days, the 11th of December, Dydd Llywelyn yr Ail, Llywelyn ein Llywola, when our independence was struck down tragically on the banks of the Irfon. Llywelyn's head, legend has it, was washed in spring near the village of Kilmary, and then displayed in London with a crown of ivy to mock him. But ivy, knotted tight and evergreen, was to the Celts a symbol of rebirth, the ultimate spring that can wash away injustice. As the poet Patrick Jones reminded us at his speech at the Merthyr rally, we can learn from our tragic past, but the key is to work hard to instigate a positive, shining future, a Wales where no one is homeless, where everyone has a meaningful life-supporting job, where everyone has access to a dentist and a doctor, where aspiration is not limited by postcode, where everyone has the chance to learn and speak Welsh, where everyone will be cared for and supported in old age, where everyone, no matter their age, gender, class, colour, religion, disability, ethnicity, race or sexual orientation, has equal opportunities. The halls of our past and of our princes are long gone. The hall of our future is ours to own and ours now to build. Diolch fawr iawn. A nawr, os oes gyda chi unrhyw gwestiynau, if you've got any questions, happy to answer them.
Absolutely.
My contact lens might just pop out at 1 second, so there's a dramatic pause.
If I can ask then, in relation to what has been happening now with COVID and independence, would you expect an independent Wales to have a vaccination programme happening as quickly as Wales that is part of the United Kingdom?
Yes, I think that we look at, again, at small countries that have brought forward vaccination plans, and we look at, of course, at many of those countries have done so both independently, so they have made their own provision, but they've also done so collaboratively as well. And those that are members of the European Union have done so through the collaborative path, but have also made provision for themselves, and Wales would do the same. And
but wouldn't you be shutting yourself off to the buying power of the strength of being able to purchase large numbers of vaccines?
I don't think there's any evidence of that. I think small countries have brought forward very, very clear, ambitious, published plans for the vaccination of the people. I don't think there's any suggestion. Adrian, correct me if I'm wrong. I've seen there's a lot of criticism of lack of global coordination that has been a feature in the pandemic. But I think in this particular, in relation to this, small countries have have been very, very active in all areas, both in relation of publishing their vaccination plans. They've been very, very agile. And in terms of the levels of excess deaths, for example, if we look at the position of many of the Scandinavian countries in a much better position than sadly that we are in Wales. And so, it's those small countries that have been the real success stories, and right throughout both in terms of life saving, but also in terms of the economy as well. So, it is it's the New Zealands, it's the Taiwans, but also even within Europe, many of the small countries have been much more innovative and much more successful in many ways than I would expect an independent Wales would have been as well.
It's clear that there's an increased interest and somewhat, to some degree, an increased support for independence, but it's still far from enjoying a majority of support from the Welsh people. This is an electoral gamble for you.
Well, look, I think it's the right thing for us to do, because for the reasons that I outlined, the context has changed. I mean, devolution is not a sustainable solution to our problems. I think it was Alan Davies, Labour MS, that was quoting that said devolution is dead. So we need now to decide as a nation what our constitutional future is. Now, I think in terms of the opinion polls, we are now where Scotland was in 2010, and they held a referendum 4 years later. And of course, that referendum was very, very close. So even in those terms, we are at a position where I think that the momentum is clear. The people of Wales, we are, as a nation, not only in the relatively rare position as a nation of not being independent, we are also in the position that we've never been asked whether we want to become independent. I think the people of Wales deserve that, and obviously it'll be then for people like myself and for Plaid Cymru as part of the referendum campaign to persuade a majority of our fellow citizens that this is the best way forward. But I think everyone in Wales, I think, should welcome this as an opportunity for us to have a really deep and searching national conversation about where we should go as a nation in terms of a constitutional future. We have a clear vision that all of the problems that have beset Wales over many generations will not be solved within the current constitutional situation. We can ameliorate them, but ultimately there will be no long-term solution to our deep-seated economic and social problems without independence. As a result of that, we have to have that decision in this decade, and that's why I think it's right that we are promising, if we're able to do so, we will be proposing to the Senedd a referendum within this term.
Well, I'm surprised. If you are First Minister come May, do you take that as a sort of referendum in itself, and that the argument for independence has been lost perhaps for a generation, or can we expect to see these sort of promises of referendums in every subsequent election in the near future?
Let's not start from the negative. Look, I mean, it'll be for the people of Wales to decide how they respond to the offer that we're making in terms of Wales's constitutional future and giving the people of Wales the right to decide, but also the vision that we set out as well of a new government with a new vision and a new sense of urgency. And let's see. We'll it might not be on the early hours of Friday the 7th now, because it may take a little bit longer. But we'll see what the verdict of the Welsh people will be. But they will have a clear choice at the election, and change will be on the ballot paper in a way that in a clear and radical way. And I think there is an appetite out there. I think the idea of more of the same and the status quo, I don't think I don't think there is an appetite for that. And I think people are very much open to both the idea of a change of government, but also changing the whole course of you know, the future path of the country. So, look, I look forward to I think it's going to be an exciting election campaign. There's going to be more interest in a Welsh election than I think since 1999 because of the pandemic, because people realise how important it is to their lives. And, you know, I think that's a fantastic platform for the very positive message that we have. And then, you know, we'll see where we end up in the days following. But, you know, I think the message to independent supporters, though, is clear. You know, we have an opportunity. You know, there is here a clear pledge to hold a referendum, to give the people of Wales the right to decide. And if you believe in independence, you've got to vote for it. And you know, I'm the only pro-independence candidate for that job of First Minister. I think, you know, pretty much everyone would accept that. And we're the only pro-independence party in the position to lead a government. So if you want to kind of accelerate Wales's path to independence, then you know, please, you've got to come behind us. We've got to vote for it, and because there's no point regretting it, not doing so in the days afterwards.
So to be clear, his plight performance at the election, will that determine whether the party continues to pursue a referendum for the country?
I don't understand the logic of the question. I mean, I think, look, I mean, we were founded, you know, with the raison d'etre, because you know that is the whole purpose of our party, is to ensure Wales's independence. In relation to the referendum, yes, we are now reflecting that Wales is in a different place. I don't think that is going to decelerate. I think, if anything, you know, if we're not successful in securing a referendum in this term, then I think the momentum and the mounting support and all of the reasons why we need to, I think, make that decision and embrace independence, that is only going to increase in the years following. But I don't want to wait till then. You know, if you see the world through my eyes, you know, the only long-term solution to Wales's problems is independence. And so, you know, we need to get there as soon as we can. Yes, we have to secure a referendum and win it. And so, I think electing a Plaid Cymru government is not only important in terms of actually securing the referendum itself. It's also vital in terms of winning it, because as happened in Scotland, seeing you know, a dynamic radical government, you know, even within the confines of the existing settlement, which, you know, which are very, very limiting, but even within that, a government that is starting to pushing the boundaries, a government that is building 10,000 houses a year, that is introducing, you know, parity of pay for care workers with healthcare workers, and actually creating a national health and care service, not just talking about it for 20 years. You know, a government that is focusing on our indigenous Welsh-based companies rather than, you know, checkbook economics to, you know, global companies that, you know, disappear as soon as the money runs out. I think people will be inspired by that. And basically, I suppose, if you like, the quid pro quo, or the psychological contract is, look, that's what we've been able to do within the existing, you know, limits. And we're starting to move forward. But imagine what we could do with that one arm tied behind our back. So I'm confident if we're able to form a government and we get that referendum, I think we'll win it. I think the people of Wales are ready. You know, the sense in the conversations that I get, and by the way, people start conversations with me about independence, you know, socially and, you know, my family, etc. I think people are talking about independence themselves like never before, and people want to. People's hearts, many of them are there, and they want to hear the detailed arguments, and that's why the work of the Commission was so important, and that's why the work of the Statutory Commission, because as a political party, let's be honest, we have limits on what we're able to do, you know, as a political party. The Statutory Commission will be able to, you know, drill down into the real detail of the questions, the perfectly legitimate questions that people will want answers to come the referendum, so that they can make an informed decision, and, you know, we would hope have a clear and compelling argument why, you know, Westminster is not going to solve our problems. Salvation is never going to come from that route, and we have a better alternative, which is Wales, you know, the people of Wales, our abilities, our skills, and think of the positive things that have happened during the pandemic, the things that we've learned, the bits that we have had greatest control over, contact tracing, yeah. Locally, we didn't privatize it and give it to kind of large corporates, and you know, like as happened in England. We did that a Welsh way, a better way, using local knowledge, and that enabled us to get much higher rates of contact tracing. The bit that fell down was the bit that was partially linked to the UK Lighthouse Lab system, which again, you know, privatised, etc. You know, I think the Welsh Government could have done more, you know, to tap into Welsh resources in our universities and NHS. But certainly, the message is look, we are far better at devising our own solutions to our own problems, and it kind of just makes common sense. I mean, that is true for every country in the world. There is no country, you know, the 193 that are members of the United Nations. About 140 of them won their independence after the Second World War. You know, are any of them queuing up to give the keys back? No. And, you know, there's a very good reason why, because no country ever ruled another well. You are better off working out your own solutions to your own problems. Does that mean that, look, it's going to be plain sailing? No. You know, are the first years of an independent Wales going to have some challenges? Absolutely. But do I believe that we can solve them? And ultimately, we will put ourselves on a far better path? Yes. And I think that, you know, if we're honest, right, I think most of us feel that that's probably true. Some of us have, you know, legitimate questions, as I was saying, you know, that I think we need now to move forward to the next phase. And that's what having a Plaid Cymru government, having the Statutory Commission will enable us to do, is to set out, you know, ultimately to the Welsh people in detail, look, this is the plan. This is how independence will work. We can do this, and here are in granular form are the answers to the perfectly legitimate questions that people of Wales will want. I think I answered your question there. Yeah.
The Independence Commission makes the case for two referendums. The idea partly being that a Welsh Plaid Cymru government would set the scene and make independence more affordable, because at the moment the reality is that there is a fiscal gap of £14 billion, which makes many people question whether Wales could afford it. By going for the referendum in the first term, if you were to become the Welsh government, that doesn't allow much time to really set the scene and improve the situation here in Wales. So, you know, if there were to be independence, I understand there's lots of hypotheticals in this question, then, you know, Wales wouldn't be ready for it by the Commission's own admission.
Well, you know, I think, as I said in my speech, I think that the context is evolving. And I understand, of course, why the Commission was suggesting a two-stage referendum, and indeed, as I kind of referenced, I think it was John Major recently in Scotland, for very different reasons that suggested it there. It wouldn't be our preference. Under certain circumstances, you have to revisit that possibly. But I think a preference would be to have a single question, a binding referendum. And in relation to the deficit, there are other deficits that we have to take into account. So the skills deficit, the infrastructure deficit, the investment deficit, the housing deficit. Those deficits, and if you like collectively, those are the deficits that create the fiscal deficit, because they mean that Wales is unable to realise its economic potential. And so you have a bit of a chicken and the egg there, don't you? And ultimately, we're not going to be able to solve those other deficits without independence. And that will be the pitch. That will be the pitch to the people of Wales. And
Attention. This is an emergency. Please leave the building by the nearest available exit.
I'm all for a sense of urgency, but I think this is taking it a bit too far.
Thanks for answering the question.
Right, we're all going out to march for independence now. And,